various ways, left our organs in our bodies confused by why we put stuff in us that is not so helpful. And in our minds, in our spirits, we're also vulnerable because there's a lot of information these days available, and it's packaged in such a way that it can carry us away to far-flung places that have nothing to do with our self-interest. What do you think? Possible? It's possible. I was in Mumbai the other day, walking through the airport, and just it was late at night, so I was in a liminal state, trying to catch a 1 a.m. flight. And I just happened to be scanning the vast the population of the airport. I noticed that everybody had a smartphone either in their hand, put in front of their face, or they were just about to put it away. And I thought, wow, that's pretty much true everywhere we go. It's expanded all over the world. It's a common experience that people have nowadays, the scrolling experience. So I'll talk a little bit about that. And sometimes people wonder, well, how could I make it more meaningful or reduce it or do something else altogether? And I have some answers today about how that's possible. And JM, do you have anything more to say, or should we?
I did want to maybe invite those who are joining in for the first time here. So if you would like to come and say hi, or if you brought your friend in, I would like you to introduce your friend if they are here on this program for the first time. We'd love to hear from them.
You see, I can just look at JM's face and know he wants to ask a question. That's how well I can read him on this show because we've been doing it so long. Yeah, if you're here, Charles, go ahead.
Okay, Hare Krishna. Yeah, I have, or not I have, but Faven's on the call with us today. She joined us for Bhakti on Monday, but this is her first Success Sadhana call. So
Fantastic, Faven. Thanks for coming back after the Monday show.
Thank you for having me.
Back, Faber.
Actually, this happened, just this Success Sadhana evolved because before pre-pandemic, which is a thing, there's a way that we used to go to right into Salesforce and Intel and Google. Those three we were doing regularly, going in and having meetings under the Conscious Living Network. And we were doing everything in person. And then when the lockdown came, we transferred it to this Zoom call. And that's the history of it. We've been doing it for quite some time.
Thank you for that overview. Anyone else here for the first time, or you brought your friend in here? Go ahead, Eka.
I'm here for the first time, but there might be feedback because I am listening from my computer, but this is my phone. So I turn it on so you can see me. Yeah, I actually met Vaish in Bulgaria. I think it was around March because of my friend Ivan Shopov, who introduced me to his incredible book, which I read and I love so much. I hope you guys can hear me.
Hey, sweet to
And
hear you. Good to see you again.
yeah, but well, actually, what could I do? Actually, it doesn't matter. But yeah, I'm just here. I've been meaning to go to the meditations because once I finished the book around March or April, I loved it so much that I immediately just sent a message. There was like a QR code or something, like contact us to let us know what you thought, and I just sent you guys a message. And yeah, I've been meaning to join the meditations for months, and I finally did it for the first time on Friday because now I'm in LA finally since July. So I need to be better with the timing. It's like 6 p.m., which back in Bulgaria was like 1 a.m. or so, midnight or something. So I'm gonna stop rambling now. Thanks for having me, guys. Good to see you again, Vash, and see you, everybody.
Yeah, Ace. Good to see you again, too. Thank you for joining. Fantastic.
Welcome, is glad to have you on the program. And thanks, Eka, for introducing. Anyone else here for the first time or after a long time?
I'm here for the first time and I work on the sales side of Salesforce. So it's very rare that I have a 30 minutes or an hour for these meetings. So I'm very excited to be here.
Oh, That's so touching. Thank you very much for using that valuable time you have to join us here today. We really appreciate it. Great to have you.
Hey, sorry, quick note. Hello all. My name is Sharath, and I'm also from Salesforce. I have been in the meetings a few times before. Every time I come here, I go back with positive energy. So I hope to be a regular going forward. So thanks for having me.
Fantastic. How is it that we could tell you're from Salesforce just as soon as you turned your camera off? It's the branding. It's fantastic. Makes me feel at home. That's my home away from home, Salesforce. Well, great. Anyone else? Just like to say hey? JM, let's sally forth. So, in the consideration of the context, going back to the purpose of life, and just thinking, do I have a purpose or is it random? That's a debate that's been going on since the beginning of philosophy. There are deconstructionists like Derrida who said that there can be no conclusion, everything's contradictory ultimately, so it's just the process that counts. And then there were the big three, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, who said, no, the purpose of philosophy, of discussion, or of even asking questions is to come to what Plato called the good. There is a an end to knowledge. And that's parallel with the thinking of the Eastern scholars who were very much uh, tied with the wisdom literatures like the Bhagavad Gita and the Vedanta Sutra, the Yoga Sutra, Patanjali, very popular nowadays. It's the yoga psychology and about meditation, what the mind does, what the various stages of the mind are, and so forth. And the conclusion or the anta, the end of Veda or knowledge is that there is a sanguine ending point to our philosophical inquiries. It doesn't end, however, it's the beginning of a new way of living. And that's the context that we present these ideas today, and that is they're meant to bring us to a higher perspective, something beyond what we may be able to perceive just by our senses. So, going to the topic at hand, and the title of today, Scroll Less by Asking More. I just presented this the other night at Santa Cruz, at UC Santa Cruz, to a large group of students. And as an icebreaker, we asked people why they came. And they all said because they saw the thing that said scroll less. And every one of them had some interest in that. And it piqued my interest also because I've been thinking about it a lot. It seems to be universal, as I mentioned in the beginning, that we're fascinated by various topics going by very quickly that are full of light and imagery and so forth. And it reminded me of Plato, who talked about the cave and the cave dwellers. He gives this elaborate analogy of how people in the world, this world we're in now, are like cave dwellers. They're facing the back of the cave. Behind them is fire. And in front of them, there are puppeteers who are raising different objects. And because of the fire behind them, it creates shadows on the walls. And the people inside the cave, what he calls the cave dwellers, are enamored of the imagery on the cave wall. And they take that as reality. And then he says one day, one of the inhabitants of the cave goes outside somehow. And then he sees the free light of the sun and the no longer shadows, but he's actually seeing the real forms of the world, trees and lakes and stones and people walking around. And when he comes back in the cave and then mentions it, it's very difficult, to say the least, for the people to accommodate such a vision. And therefore, he points out, does Plato, that there's a hesitancy to look beyond our present context to see something that's perhaps beyond what we're used to. But that's what the philosophers, I'll say from the context of today's talk, the Greek philosophers and also the Vedantists, the Eastern philosophers, and there is some connection. When you read Plato, you'll see that there's a lot of ideas that parallel the ancient Vedas as well. And a friend of mine who's a historian was telling me the other day there were trading routes that did connect ancient Greece to the Vedic culture, and therefore some of the ideas there was reciprocity of the between those philosophers at that time. Having said that as a preamble, let's go into the topic. How would one scroll less by asking more? Well, that begs the question what scrolling really is. And I'm giving it the definition when we don't know our purpose, we default to randomness or escapism. So scrolling doesn't just mean the act of looking at your smartphone and moving your thumb and your mind just going blank because the images are going by so fast and you can't finish even one of them because it's either rejected or accepted by the mind. It's interacting with the world in such a way that we may not connect things. And when we don't know our purpose for looking at anything, it can become randomness or escapism. So here's the problem I'm posing as a hypothesis or the thesis of this idea or this presentation. And the next slide, we talk about the solution, which is already something I alluded to in the title. Problem, then solution. Ask the right questions. Why are questions important? Because they are hooks. I'll talk about this a little later, what they mean rhetorically, and about how one of the primary wisdom literature from the East talks about how the question is the most important implement we have for self-realization and for improving ourselves. I'll leave it at that for now, and I'll go into it a little more later. So the problem is interacting with the world without a clear purpose. That becomes scrolling. And anything we do can be like that. That leads to escapism. Escaping, what are we escaping? Let's go into that in a second. But first, next slide, scrolling the mind's escape into randomness. And I use that word escape very deliberately because as Erich Fromm in the next slide says in his book, Escape from Freedom, isn't that an enticing title? Escape from freedom, what does that mean? Well, I just summarized his bent in that book, which is our tendency is to avoid the weight of purposeful choice by fleeing into distraction, conformity, or anything else that saves us from having to ask who we really are. I'll read it again. Our tendency is to avoid the weight of purposeful choice by fleeing into distraction, conformity, or anything else that saves us from having to ask who we are. And just a little bit more about Erich Fromm. Come into the Zoom room just for a second. His book, Escape from Freedom, is a survey of history and showing how political movements, religious movements, sociological movements rise and then morph into other things, partly because people strive for freedom at certain times, and when they achieve freedom, then it becomes frightening. The weight of it, of having everything depend on your own free will. For instance, he talks about in the feudal ages when people had a trade and they would become expert at it. They would work within the context of their own area, usually a village. They would produce something very useful for society. They knew how much they were going to get paid. And although they didn't have freedom as we know it today for entrepreneur, of course, that's debatable how much we actually have, but the concept of capitalism and so forth, then which eventually gave people more freedom and less sense of security or conformity, then led to them again coming back to some kind of authoritarianism. In history, this repeats itself over and over again in all the various phases of life. So people get some, they strive for freedom, they get a little freedom, and then they go back into a condition where they really don't have to exercise their freedom. Somebody else tells them exactly what to do. And so this is what he means by escape from freedom. And it happens on an individual level, he says, and also on a societal level as well. So I'm using this point to emphasize the ways in which we have freedom. What is our freedom? Our freedom is where we place our attention at any given moment. If you analyze that and just think about it and reduce it down to what is our actual freedom, you can think about any moment that we have from the time we wake up till the time we go to sleep. We have choices. We have free will to say, where am I going to point my attention? In fact, on the outside of my office here, I have a sign that someone made me for my birthday. It says, where attention goes, energy flows. Because that's a statement I make at least once a day. And when you think about it, it's our choice to let our attention go into a black hole, otherwise known as a smartphone set to scroll somewhere. Or we can very deliberately decide to place our attention somewhere where we've decided we're getting the best investment on our attention. We've done our due diligence and we've decided, well, better to read this book or better to attend to the business I have at hand rather than procrastinating it. But have you ever felt the weight of having free will and then retreated even for a moment or two or longer into a state where you felt like you were escaping from your choice or the idea that you should be doing something else? Have you ever had that feeling? I hope somebody says yes, because it'll make me feel a lot better about my own life. Okay, thanks, Ace. And how do I say it? Louisiana?
Yeah, you said it perfectly.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I saw you smiling, so I took it as a yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so, this is if we think about it, what our situation is, then we can notice it by being introspective that we're faced with this conundrum, and it's a little daunting being a human. Because as humans, we can understand causality. We can also see that and understand there's a better and worse places to place our attention. But what's that mechanism that helps us to move to higher choices? The choices that we thought up for ourselves, can we actually do it? A lot of questions around that. Procrastination is a big topic. And it's not just because of laziness. There's a sense of overwhelmed sometimes, and much of that has to do with the psychological weight of the free will. So Eric Fromm, Escape from Freedom. What do you think of the title, and what do you think of the idea of escaping from freedom? Just about the title, does that resonate with you at all? What do you think? Oh yeah, I forgot to tell everybody this is interactive. It's not just me, luckily for everybody. What do you think? Any thoughts you have about escaping from freedom, just that idea, or in the context I was talking about it, what have you experienced? What do you think?
I
Ace
would like
just
to
came
say,
off mute. Go
I
for
think
it, Ace.
that's yeah, I realize I have my headphones on the phone so I can turn off my speakers and plug the headphones in. I can hear you actually. Yeah, I love that idea. Thanks so much for sharing that. And I just wanted to add that it's interesting that sometimes I was just recently watching hearing someone say that it's totally okay to do that, to like get lost in social media for a while, but it's interesting to try to see how much are you in control of that decision consciously, right? Let me just do that real quick. Or how much is it just in control of you? You just end up on the phone and lose 30 minutes. And just kind of notice that dynamic and try to shift it more into the being a conscious decision rather than it being in control of you. And I feel like that's a really cool thing, similar to
Yes,
what you're saying.
this is my uh, definition of scrolling. It's randomness. So what you just said is you may take some time to do it and you say it's a conscious choice to do it for how long, that's for how long. Then it's not random. It's something that I didn't default to, but I actually decided to do it for because I want to learn something, do something, or just it's a recreation. But at least I have there's some conscious, as you say, it's a conscious choice, a conscious decision. So that would be different from randomness, right? Yeah, definitely. Nice point. JM, there's one Nicholas just put up.
Yes. Nicholas says, what is the difference between I must scroll versus I must do chores? Which one is free will?
I must go between I must scroll and I must do chores. I don't know. What do you think? How do you feel about doing chores versus scrolling? Which one feels more deliberate to you?
Nicholas?
To me, doing chores, and I have some, I like them. One is less stressful. Which is less stressful? Drum roll, please. This is the moment of truth. Really stressful. Okay. I feel my experience is I feel less stressed if I'm doing my chores. And I'll talk about that in just a minute, why I feel like that. I'm accepting yours as valid too. Maybe it's a way of getting free from stress. But when I feel I'm doing chores, which I would say there are things I think it's my duty to do. That's what I think of chores. At least that's how I was inculcated when I was a kid to do my chores. It's the moment versus the future. Okay. Anybody, any other thoughts about the idea of escaping from freedom or the different states of consciousness you have when you're engaged in either randomness? Does it give you less stress, or do you feel more in the present one way or the other in the moment when you're scrolling or in the moment when you're doing your chores, or any other thoughts? Radha.
I feel when I'm in a random mode scrolling, after some time when I see how much time is lost, I really feel bad. I really feel bad. It's kind of a sign about that randomness is not without purpose.
You
Wasting
know
time.
what, Radha, it sounds like you're in a spaceship on a moonshot going further and further away from
Sorry about that.
internet.
Can you hear me now? Mhm.
Well, I
You hear?
heard that. I don't know if I can hear a complete
All right.
sentence.
Sorry about that. So I'm just saying that when I'm in a scrolling mode, after some time, I feel I've lost so much time.
Yeah, you may not even calculate how much time. I mean, generally with scrolling, people don't set a timer and say, I'll do this for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever. You know, you could just lose time and it leaks out. Well put. I think that's valid. Absolutely. One more. Anybody, any other observations?
I think it's also about how you feel after you finish
Hmm.
bowling. For me, I commute from San Jose to the Salesforce Tower every day, so I know my commute is an hour and 10 minutes on the BART. And my first few days there, I was on my phone and I just I get there and yeah, I think about, wow, I've been on my phone for an hour doing nothing versus now it's like I have these little spots on the way to the bar where I'm like, oh, I passed that little graffiti thing, or and I realize I feel better when I get to San Francisco because I wasn't just looking at my phone. I was like, oh, like that tree is growing or all these little things. And it's like my hour, yes, I didn't work. I wasn't reading or anything, but seeing those little points already make my day better early in the morning versus if I would have just been on my phone looking for something that I don't even know about. So just also thinking about that end result of once you're done with your time.
Yeah, what a good point, Luciana. I was thinking, and I made this metaphor earlier about eating junk food. It feels okay in the minute, but later on there's sort of a whatever kind of rush you get from carbs or sugar, whatever, and then you feel like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Uh, and I noticed how you said, after, how do you feel after? That's also an indication too. Do you feel like you're edified? Did it make you grow, or did it feel like empty calories, using that metaphor? Yeah, nice one. Jam Sundar put something up.
Yeah. So they're saying escape from freedom, uncertainty, and responsibility. Choices weigh down on our shoulders at important junctures in our lives.
Yeah, having to make decisions, and that's another topic. It's a very important one, how to make proper decisions, but it's weighty, isn't it? And so understanding the human condition as a, a time in which we're vulnerable and we're given this freedom of choice as humans. And the more we're sense controlled and more in the mode of sattva, which is a whole nother topic we covered on Monday in another show, the more our choices become apparent. We can also put ourselves into states of consciousness where we're not free, and we our choices become fewer because of our habits, and then we can become oppressed. Like addiction, we may know intellectually this is a bad idea, I shouldn't do this, even as you're putting whatever it is in your mouth or touching whatever, and then you think, oh God, I wish I wasn't doing this, but it's really hard to overcome the impulse. And in that state, we may realize our freedom intellectually, but how would I actually break through and do this? That becomes another thing. Oh, good. We got Ariana. Go ahead, Jam.
Ariana says, you mentioned making proper decisions. What is your process? What are your steps for making proper decisions and choices of your life?
Well, one of the processes is we call deliberation. And I like the word because in order to be deliberate, which is make good decisions or make decisions at all, we have to deliberate. Deliberate is a Latin word. It has the smaller word Libra in it. And if you know the Libra sign for astrology, it's the pan scales. You weigh things out. And so the ancient wisdom literatures, all of them, and that's what philosophy is for, is really weigh out what are your choices in this world and what are the results of those choices. If you think about it ahead of time, like this is what we're doing here. We're coming together for an hour to talk about, okay, what are our choices and what are the results of our choices? That's philosophy. And when we have that foresight, then when we come to a crossroads and we're very clear about what our priorities are, what's our purpose in life, and then what are the top priorities under that huge umbrella of our purpose, then it's easier to make decisions at that time. So my process is to stay in these conversations, because just because I made good decisions one day doesn't mean I'm going to make them the next day. So we have to start over every day. And that's partly what spiritual practice is. It's very practical. It's analyzing what are the choices we have with our to use our free will for. Most people don't think about it. In fact, holidays are coming up, and you say, "What's the holiday about?" It's like, I have no idea, but I know I have to buy presents. That's one thing for sure. You know, and so many things are on automatic, and we don't think about them because we didn't deliberate on them. And if you deliberate on them, then you can be deliberate. So that's one of the points. And I love the topic of decision making. We had a seminar about it when I was just in India. And it's very helpful to think about how to make better decisions. Partly it's getting more information and doing what we're doing now. Fantastic. Thanks for all the input, everybody. This is a great session so far. Okay, so let's go, JM, to another slide and see if we can take it a couple steps further. The next one is the result of our quote unquote escape. So there is a phenomenon, psychological phenomenon called cognitive dissonance. And of course, resonance means that you harmonize, that there's a note that you hear, and then it hits you in the right place. Dissonance means that it's off key. Everyone's had that experience, especially those musicians here today. They know the difference. Of course, most people do intuitively. They hear something discordant and then it becomes a disturbance. So, cognitive dissonance, the mental discomfort we feel when our actions contradict our deepest values or beliefs. Scrolling amplifies this gap. So, there's a way in which when we haven't been, we haven't deliberated about what's my purpose or what are my priorities, what are my main values. And then we go to a default mode where we're doing something like Luciana was saying. It's kind of, wow, what happened? I just wasted my time for an hour. There's a sense of a dread, a sense of a disappointment in ourselves. There are many different adjectives we can use, but it goes to this feeling of cognitive dissonance. I'm not connected in the right way. I'm not fulfilling my purpose. I may be doing something against what are intuitively my values. And so when we're scrolling, even though there's some sense of satisfaction because at least we're not, uh, well, I would just say, I don't know if there's any sense of satisfaction, at least not for me, but it comes from this dissatisfaction from ignoring what's important. And as humans, we have an intuitive sense for things that are important. We have our values and so forth. And so scrolling of any kind, random living, without considering what's important, it can bring us to this sense of dissonance. Our minds we feel either slightly or acutely uncomfortable. Possible? Possible. So what if we came into resonance? So philosophy. What is philosophy? Next slide. It's the examination by deliberate inquiry of the difference between a random life and a purposeful life. Simple definition of philosophy. We philosophize all the time. I'll give you an example. Let's say your best friend was coming home from work and her car got bumped and got a little dent in it in the parking lot, and then comes home in anxiety. And then you say to her, "Oh, it's just a car after all." Is that philosophy? Absolutely. It's like, what's most important? At least you're okay. Okay, so let's say you say to her, okay, your car got bumped, and I know it's brand new, and you just got it last week. I know it hurts. But after all, it's just a car, and you're okay. Is that philosophy? My contention is absolutely. And if you look at it from our existential situation, it's really an examination by asking questions. What's the difference between a random life and a purposeful life? And what does purpose mean? And is there an ultimate purpose to life? These are questions that people have been asking since the time immemorial, and some people specialize in that. Other people don't think about it at all, and they end up in a default mode. And until we have some reason, some guidance to actually ask these questions and discern for ourselves what's most important, then, as Socrates said in the next slide, the unexamined life is not worth living. What do you think about his statement? Too extreme? Let's see it, Jam. Next one. Next slide says, the unexamined life is not worth living. Too extreme? What do you think? Is that too much pressure? Shouldn't we just be free to do whatever we want and not really think about anything? Or isn't that a little fanatical to say the unexamined life is not worth living at all? How do you feel about his statement? Any reactions? Like, don't like? 10 means like, 1 means hate. Vicky likes it.
I would also say that it's, sorry, I forgot about this. I would say that it's a little too drastic, as you said, but there is a lot of truth in it because through like being aware, at least for me, you kind of reach this bliss and joy. I don't know, it's so weird. And you kind of connected to that pure form,
Mm.
and it's kind of like the essence of everything. So technically it's right. However, we're still human beings, so we err, and that's what makes us human. And so it's fun, I feel like, to somehow just be like John Lennon would say, a time wasted, if enjoyed, is not time wasted. So there's a little bit of a flip side of that as well.
Nice. Nice balancing act there, Ace. Thanks a lot. And look, JM, MJ's got something up there, and so does Sundar. And so does Nicholas.
Yeah, so MJ says it isn't in the present, so it doesn't have meaning to us yet. It isn't in the present, so it doesn't have meaning to us yet.
Okay, and Sundar?
And Sundar, it's just that we are not trained in that way in the modern education system.
Hmm. And let's see Nicholas to bring it to give some variety here. Nicholas says,
Yeah.
I believe it's true. Otherwise, you would not learn yourself, which is a large part. One thing we could say about his Socrates' statement is it's provocative, right? Everyone agree? Provocative? It's provocative. And I think philosophers are meant to be provoke us to think. And so whether we consider it a 1 or a 5 or a 10, it does provoke us to think. And that's one of the purposes of philosophy. And so what I'm saying here is now let me say a little bit more about Socrates' point of view. Maybe that'll help too. Going back to that same slide where Socrates says, the unexamined life is not worth living. We know the word cosmos. We spell it with a C. The Greeks spelled it with a K. Whenever you see a word spelled with K, you generally think, oh, yeah, that's Greek. So cosmos, it actually means, it's the opposite of chaos. Cosmos means we live in an ordered universe. There is order to the universe. I mean, that's we can think of certain ways in which there's order in the universe. Name 3 where you can definitely discern that there's order in the universe. Just put it in the chat box. Orbits of the planets. Otherwise, how could we be predictive in what's coming, right? 2 more. 20 points each, too, you get. And you can use those points at gift shops everywhere. Sunrise and sunset, same thing, moving the planet, and time. Yeah, we can calculate it. Okay, if we went on with a list, we could find all kinds of cycles and complex processes that are indicative of molecular force of attraction. Thanks, Ace. of an ordered universe. Okay, so then what he says, the next word is logos, which we're familiar with because, of course, there's a logo, but there's also the ology, and that comes from the word logos. When we say biology, there would be no point to studying anything in the world if there was no order to it because you couldn't have controlled experiment. And that's what the empiric method is that you do a controlled experiment. And the fact that we can make a controlled experiment indicates that there's some order. If it was completely random, there'd be no sense of study of the subject. And that's why the sciences end with ology. It indicates we're studying things that have a set pattern. And so his third point was that inquiry reveals the path to purpose. And that brings us to the Vedic call to inquiry, which is in the next slide. In my book that I wrote about the 4 questions, I start with this aphorism It's phoneticized down below. It's originally written in Sanskrit, which is in a different alphabet altogether. But it goes like this, Atato Brahma Jignasa. And it's a note to all humans. Dear humans, now is your time to inquire. So it's inviting us to become self-actualized by asking questions. And it's in one of the most, of all the ancient wisdom literatures, the Vedanta Sutra, at least from Eastern philosophers, is considered to be the foremost because it's a consolidation of all the former thought that was put forth in the Upanishads. And this is the first statement that comes there is ask a question. So here's a few of my thoughts below that make this a universal process. People are allergic to sectarianism, and also if you say religion, God, everyone, well, most people have a knee-jerk, which one? What are you talking about? What does it mean? And so forth. So here's the entry point for all people interested in self-actualization or spiritual practice. Here it is in the bullet points. Spiritual life begins with a sincere question. Doesn't matter who you are, where you are, what culture, what religion you say you're part of. The point is that if you ask sincerely, the implication is the answer is forthcoming. We live in an environment that is reciprocal and accommodating. The next one is you don't have to accept any tradition to begin. You have to commit to anything. Your process, your progress in spiritual life begins with your own inquiry. You don't have to ascribe to any particular church, religion, or anything like that. If you ask as a human being, then you enter into the metaphysical realm. And thirdly, you only need the courage to ask the deepest question. You only need the courage to ask. So why wouldn't we have courage to ask big questions? That's my question to all of you. I mean, sometimes we see that if you ask a big question, I experienced it as a child. I probably unnerved my parents. In fact, I know I did, because even when I was a little kid, I used to ask them, why do I have to die? How do you like explaining that to your kid who's in kindergarten and say, like, okay, well, here, what are they going to say? They didn't really have the context to explain that. So I asked other people in other books and things like that. But why does why would it take, do you think, courage to ask big questions, esoteric questions? Or maybe you don't agree. Oh, look, Sundar said something.
This is factor of unknown.
What do you mean by that? Could you say more about that, Sundar?
Yes, Prabhu. I was just thinking about, I mean, you were talking about the point of, asking question about death, and that is a mystery actually, and we don't know exactly what it is unless we look to the wisdom text like the Bhagavad Gita and other yoga wisdom texts. So there is a big factor of unknown, what is this phenomena of death? What happens at the time of death? What happens after that? Am I still um, do I still exist after that? So there is a lot of unknown there. So I would rather not face that, you know, the discomfort of understanding what the unknown is and um, just escape from that. So I was thinking from that viewpoint.
And thank you. It's poignant. Here's what the ancient philosophers said about that. When you don't face reality, or at least ask what reality is, then you are in what they call avidya, which means ignorance. And ignorance means ignorance. And ignorance means scrolling. It means mindlessly looking at anything random so I don't have to face reality. I'll give you a very practical example. There's a famous musician named Warren Zevon, and he was afraid his whole life of getting cancer. I know this because I saw an interview with him on a famous with a famous interviewer who's on television, and you can look it up on YouTube. That interview is there. And he always feared, somehow he had an ingrown fear of getting cancer. Maybe it was in his family or something. I didn't catch that part. So he wouldn't go to the doctor. And also when he started feeling symptoms, he also didn't want to go to the doctor because he didn't want to hear the words. He didn't want to hear the C word. And by the time he did, because he was so overcome by something, he didn't know what it was yet, but they finally tested him and they said, you have cancer. And if you'd come in here 6 months earlier, we could have saved you. We can't now. And so ignorance means, like, if you don't face reality, then you'll remain in cognitive dissonance. And also, we may not be able to make choices that extricate us from very complex situations. Better to face reality. And we get these statements like reality is beautiful. And it's light. It's not darkness. So I just say scrolling is a avoidance of reality on many different levels, but on a very deep level, it's avoiding the inevitable. And to that degree, there's a book by a psychologist, I think his name's Skinner. He said it's called Denial of Death. And he points out that, boy, I hope this isn't too macabre for the audience today. But he says that every human distraction that we have is all ingrown very deep on a very deep level, just trying to scroll and forget about the inevitable. Whereas the Vedic sages say it's not scary at all, actually, because we never die. We're only transferring conditions from one to another. And once you bring the light in, it's not scary. In fact, it enhances your life. Of course, we all know the story of Socrates when they asked him to shut up or maybe, die by execution or kill himself. He just said, yeah, what's the difference? I'm here. I'll be somewhere else. You can't kill me. So he faced it because as a philosopher, he had made it his main point in life to understand the difference between life and death, who I am and who I'm not, and so forth. Oh, look, Louisiana said something.
Louisiana says there is no growth if you don't face reality.
Wow, that's fantastic. We should make that a bumper sticker. That's a good one because, yeah. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, I think as a Gen Z, we also like use the term bed rotting, if you know what that is, like just scrolling on your phone for hours and not doing anything. And I've been guilty of it too sometimes if something's happened or like I'm feeling sad. I've tend you bed rot, you're on your phone, you're scrolling and then you end up doing nothing and there's no growth. You still feel sad after and if you don't face whatever you're facing, whether it's positive or negative, you don't get to reflect and learn from it. So,
Wow, I love that. That's fantastic. And the term I'd not heard before, but it's brutal.
yeah, bed rotting. It's not great.
It's brutal. All right, well, here you go. That you gave us a jumping off point from my last slides. And Sharat said, I do it when I'm sad. Okay, here we go. Last slides. So I finished the deck because it comes to a conclusion and there's something practical to take away. The Greeks and Vedics, we're calling them, both say we reach truth through questioning. Purpose is discovered through inquiry, not through scrolling. So that really goes according to what you just said, Luciana, is to face it and ask questions about it. That's a very benign way to enter into it, just to ask, inquire. Maybe I don't know and I'm scared of it, but still don't be scared to ask. So, uh, principle, rhetorical principle. This is about questions themselves. Whoever asks the questions is leading the conversation. So if you want to be ahead of scrolling and you want to be ahead of any conversation, be the one asking the questions because you're rhetorically speaking, you're leading the conversation in your life or in whatever context you're in. Powerful punctuation. The question mark is a hook, a question that hooks the mind and gives it direction. And it can hook other people's minds too. So then we come to the importance of questions. Transcend scrolling. This is my thesis in the next slide. Transcend scrolling by asking the right questions. And to that end, and because I was interested in the topic, whenever I'm interested in a topic, I like to write about it for my own edification. I wrote this book called The Four Questions. And here are the four questions that I use myself, and that's why I felt confident to put them in a book. The first one is, what's my purpose? What does that question do when I keep asking it? It lifts my consciousness from randomness to direction. In other words, I'm lifted out of scrolling, which I'm saying is randomness, into a direction to go. Because if I'm asking what's my purpose and I'm assuming life is purposeful, there's logos, then I can legitimately ask that question and get a solid answer. Next question is, how may I be of service? This question shifts our minds from self-concern to contribution. And according to the Eastern philosophers, the mode in which we're most comfortable and where we're growing the most is in service mind. When we're thinking how to contribute, rather than thinking about self-preservation, we feel satisfied, plus we feel abundant. It's counterintuitive because I think generally the default mode is, unless I protect every asset I have, I'm going to lose it, I'm going to die. But in the flow of abundance, or the entryway to the flow of abundance is to think of how to contribute. How can I be of the best service? In fact, those who teach entrepreneurialism, tell me if you've heard this before, but they say, if you want to build a robust business, think about how to serve more people and then fulfill that that need and try to say the more you can serve people, the better you're going to do. That's in business. But in life, in general, if that becomes your mode, think of how you can do the best type of service. Then this is one of the questions to ask to pull oneself out of that survival mode and into the flow of abundance. How may I be of service? Keep asking that question. The next question, number 3, is what's the lesson? And I always give a caveat with this. It's one of the hardest questions to ask because my default mode is I want to wallow in victimhood. That is, it just seems so appropriate when something happens to me in this world. Of course, in this context, it could be good or bad, but I'm just saying when we get a reversal of fortune, we may think, why me? Why not somebody else? I don't deserve this. That's not productive. Just ask, what's the lesson to extract? And you rise to higher ground. And this, according to all philosophers, or many philosophers, I should say, but those from the East, especially Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, those who are in that culture, say that the universe is a schoolroom. Every single thing that happens to us is meant to teach us a lesson. And the only way to ask to learn the lesson is to be aware that every situation is didactic. And if I ask the question, what's the lesson? Everyone will look at me like, what did you just say? You should be wallowing in victimhood right now. And your mind might say it too. But if you learn to say this question, it transforms events, including setbacks, into growth. And the final question is, what's the best investment of my attention right now? All the words are deliberately placed there because our asset, which can grow, is our attention. And if we waste it, just like sometimes people make a lot of money in sports or music, and then you find out they're totally broke because they just throw it away, their money, and waste it on expensive stuff, and then that has no appreciation, and so forth. And so the same thing with our attention. Our attention is our main asset, and we invest it by where we're placing it at any given moment. Now, that overwhelm we feel about the future or the disgust we feel about the past or embarrassment, where it may be, it can be overcome by asking this question regularly, constantly. Where should I invest my attention right now? Well, where will I get the best return on my attention? And if you just stay in that from moment to moment, you're on the train and you say, what's better, looking into the screen, or should I read a book, or could I study my notes before I get to the meeting? Or at any given time, in a relationship, what's the best investment of my attention? It's paying attention to my to the person I'm relating to without diverting it any other direction. And then finally, we have your questions are your compass. Ask the right ones, and your mind will always find its way. So I'm presenting the question as the tool in which we can pull ourselves out of the maelstrom of scrolling, whether it's on a phone or any other place in our minds or in a random interaction with the universe or in relationships. Ask these 4 questions and others, your own original questions. And there is an answer. That's the uncanny aspect of the mystical world we live in, is the questions come to us, the answers come to us, but we have to be the ones who have the courage to ask them. And now I say Om Tat Sat, which means that's the end. This was the best Zoom room ever because of how much all of you gave stimulating questions, points. It's fantastic. I feel like I just invested my attention in something really valuable by spending time with all of you, and I thank you very much. And that reminds me of a joyful way, because somebody mentioned joy here a minute ago, of saying uh, goodbye. In fact, there's places in India where they never say goodbye because they don't like that. Of course, to some people, maybe they do. But if people that you want to be around, you never say goodbye. You say, just I'll see you again soon. But one of the ways that yogis high in the Himalayas say it, they have this phrase, Hari Bol. It means keep the vibration going and we'll do it together again soon. They put their hands way up in the air and they say, Hari Bol. You want to try it? I'm doing it. Hari Bol.
Haribol!
Thanks, everybody.
Haribol.
Great to see you. I'm so
Thank you.
excited. I can't wait to see you again. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hari Bol.